We spend, just an incredible amount of time and money thinking about home security. We install these smart locks. We set up, motion sensor cameras. We check the deadbolts, all just to keep intruders out.
Oh, absolutely. We're obsessed with fortifying our spaces.
Right. But what if the most insidious intruder doesn't break in at all? Like, what if they just bypass the alarm system entirely because, well, you carry them right through the front door yourself, zipped up in your favorite piece of luggage?
Yeah, that is the ultimate stealth invasion. You build this impenetrable fortress, you lock the doors, and yet the threat is already unpacking its bags in your bedroom.
It is honestly a terrifying image. And our mission today on this deep dive is to uncover the incredibly stealthy biology of bed bugs. We're going to decode the invisible warning signs they leave behind and, learn exactly how you can inspect and protect your home before a minor hitchhiker becomes a major infestation. We are using a really comprehensive guide by Ian Chi from Simple Pest Management for this.
It's a fantastic resource, really breaks down the behavioral science behind them.
It really does. Now, before we jump in, just a quick note for you listening. If you enjoy this deep dive, please follow and like the show. Also, be sure to follow Simple Pest Management on social media and visit www.simplepest.com. Because by the time you actually see one of these pests, which, by the way, can flatten themselves to the width of a credit card and might be making your bedroom smell like overripe raspberries, they've probably been living with you for weeks.
That is the core issue right there. We are so heavily conditioned to just trust our eyes, right? If a space looks immaculate, if the floors are shining, we just assume the environment is safe.
Yeah, exactly.
But we are dealing with an organism that has spent thousands of years evolving alongside humans, specifically to evade our sight. I mean, they just don't operate on our terms.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to catch a master hider, you first have to really understand what it wants and how it operates. There is this massive pervasive stigma that bed bugs are a sign of dirtiness.
Oh, the stigma is huge.
Right. People think, oh, my house is spotless. I vacuum every day. I could never get bed bugs. I always assumed they were drawn to grime or decay. So why does an insect choose a perfectly clean luxury mattress over, like, a trash can?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer biological specialization at play. Bed bugs are fundamentally different from pests like, say, ants or cockroaches.
Also.
Ants are foragers. They are looking for spilled sugar, crumbs on the floor, organic decay, that sort of thing. Bed bugs have absolutely zero interest in your food debris. None.
So they don't care if I ate crackers in bed?
Not even a little bit. They are strictly nocturnal blood feeders.
Huh.
Their entire sensory apparatus has been fine-tuned over millennia to track just two very specific environmental cues.
And what are those?
The carbon dioxide we exhale and the ambient warmth radiating from our bodies.
Wow. So they're essentially heat-seeking vampires that carpool in our suitcases.
Yeah.
They're just waiting for a pulse.
Biologically speaking, yeah, that is a highly accurate description. They possess these highly specialized receptors on their antenna that can actually detect minute changes in carbon dioxide levels in a room.
That's wild. So they just smell us breathing.
Basically, yes. And their evolutionary design is perfectly synchronized with our circadian rhythms. When you enter deep sleep, your breathing slows down, right? It becomes incredibly rhythmic.
Right, right.
And that releases a steady, concentrated plume of CO2. To a bed bug, that plume is essentially a dinner bell. They wait until the lights are out, the environment is still, and then they follow that invisible chemical trail up the bedpost.
Ugh, that feels like science fiction. But I mean, if they were physically traveling from the floor to the bed, how are people not spotting them?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if there was a bug the size of an apple seed walking across my white sheets, I'd definitely notice.
Well, adult bed bugs are indeed about 5 to 7 millimeters long, with those flat oval bodies that turn sort of elongated and reddish after a blood meal. But the adults aren't actually the primary infiltrators.
But they aren't.
No. The juveniles, which are known as nymphs, are the real ghosts of this operation. When they hatch, nymphs are barely a millimeter long and nearly translucent.
Wait, translucent, like you can see right through them?
Yes. They lack the pigmented exoskeleton of an adult. So if a translucent nymph is crawling on a white bed sheet or hiding in the cream-colored stitching of a suitcase, it just blends in completely.
Oh my God.
They only take on a reddish hue after they feed and ingest blood. This is the exact biological mechanism that makes them such prolific hitchhikers.
Because you literally can't see them.
Right. You visit a beautiful hotel, you host a friend from out of town, or maybe you buy a pristine vintage chair. A few microscopic see-through nymphs just quietly transfer into the tiny seams of your luggage or clothing.
So they really don't need poor sanitation to thrive. They just need us.
Exactly. They just need a host. They will happily colonize a sterile penthouse apartment just as readily as a crowded hostel.
Man, you go on a luxury vacation, buy a souvenir, and accidentally bring home an invisible parasite. So if we can't rely on seeing them since they're translucent babies or hiding adults that only come out when we're literally unconscious, how do we even know they are there? We can't just wait to catch them in the act.
You really have to become a forensic investigator in your own home because the organism itself is actively avoiding detection, right? So the physical clues they leave in their wake, the biological debris of their feeding cycle, that becomes your only early warning system.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the bites, because the guide points out some psychological trickery here that completely blew my mind. I always just assumed a bug bite was a bug bite. You get bit, you get an itchy red welt.
That's what most people think, yeah.
But the guide mentions that some people have absolutely zero physical reaction to bedbug bites. How is that even biologically possible?
Well, this raises an important question. What actually constitutes proof of an infestation? When a bedbug feeds, it uses a highly complex mouthpart called a proboscis. Right. It pierces the skin and injects a cocktail of saliva that contains both an anticoagulant to keep the blood flowing and a local anesthetic so you don't wake up while they're feeding.
Wait, they know me before they bite.
They do. The itchy welt that forms hours or even days later isn't actually from the bite itself. It's an allergic reaction by your immune system to the proteins in that saliva.
Oh, I see.
And here's the trickery. Human immune systems vary wildly. Studies show a significant percentage of the population simply does not develop an allergic reaction to bedbug saliva. Their bodies just don't recognize the protein as a threat, so no histamine is released.
And no histamine means no redness and no itch.
Exactly.
So you could literally have two partners sleeping in the exact same infested bed, getting fed on equally every single night. One wakes up covered in itchy, clustered welts on their arms and neck, while the other looks completely fine and probably thinks their partner is crazy.
That happens all the time, and that discrepancy completely derails early detection. The person without reactions might just dismiss the issue, blaming a random mosquito or a mild skin rash.
Because they're like, why, I'm not getting bitten.
Right, so relying on skin reactions is inherently flawed. You must look beyond the itchy skin and rely on irrefutable physical forensic evidence.
Okay, so what is the gold standard of that forensic evidence? Because, if a bite could be a flea or a spider, what is the undeniable proof?
Well, the initial visual clue is often rust-colored or reddish bloodstains on your pillowcases or sheets.
From the bites.
Actually, these usually occur when an engorged bedbug, which gets clumsy and full of blood, gets accidentally crushed under your weight when you roll over during sleep.
Ew. Yeah.
Not pleasant, but the truly definitive sign is their fecal spotting.
The digested evidence.
Yes. Because bedbugs consume nothing but human blood, their droppings are essentially just concentrated digested blood. When they excrete it, it dries into tiny dark spots that look almost exactly like someone took a fine-tipped black or dark brown marker and just dotted it along your mattress seams.
Okay, but how do you differentiate a random marker dot or a piece of lint from digested blood?
The guide recommends a brilliant diagnostic tool for this, the ink bleed test.
The ink bleed test. Okay, how does that work?
If you find a suspicious dark spot on your mattress fabric, you touch it with a slightly moistened tissue or a cotton swab. Ordinary dirt or lint will just sit there. But dried, digested blood is water-soluble.
Oh.
So when the moisture hits it, the spot will rehydrate and bleed slightly into the surrounding fabric, turning a rusty reddish-brown, much like ink bleeding on wet paper.
Wow. That is undeniably specific. You cannot blame a bleeding rust spot on a mosquito.
No, it is absolute confirmation. You will typically find these marker dots clustered along mattress seams, the piping, or the fabric stapled underneath the box spring.
Got it. What else should we look for?
Another irrefutable piece of evidence is their shed skins. To grow, a bedbug must molt its rigid exoskeleton. They go through 5 nymphal stages before reaching adulthood, meaning a single bug sheds its skin 5 separate times.
Moving behind these hollow, translucent little ghosts of themselves all over the bed frame.
Precisely. Accumulating cast skins in the crevices of a bed frame indicates an active, growing, and feeding population. Additionally, you might spot their eggs, which are about 1 millimeter long, pearly white, and coated in a sticky substance that glues them to wood or fabric surfaces in tight clusters.
And then there's the chemical signature, right? The odor.
Yes, the odor.
The guide mentions heavily infested rooms release these alarm pheromones that smell like coriander, overripe raspberries, or damp towels. It's oddly culinary. I mean, if my bedroom starts smelling like a slightly musty raspberry salad, I'm definitely panicking.
The olfactory warning is very real. Insects use chemical signaling for everything from mating to distress. In a large harborage, the concentration of these pheromones creates a very distinct, musty, sweetish odor.
But is that an early warning sign?
Unfortunately, no. By the time a human nose can clearly detect that scent simply by walking into a room, the infestation has usually reached a pretty severe density.
Okay, so we have our forensic markers. The ink bleed, fecal spots, the rust stains, the translucent shells, the eggs, and the raspberry smell. But how do we actively hunt for this? I mean, if their whole survival strategy is staying out of sight, how do we physically get to them without destroying the furniture?
Well, conducting an inspection requires a methodical approach and a very specific toolkit. A casual glance over your fitted sheet accomplishes absolutely nothing.
Right.
You need a bright flashlight, a magnifying glass, some white sticky tape to capture any evidence without crushing it, a sealable plastic bag, and, most importantly, a simple, stiff plastic credit card.
I have to admit, using a credit card to hunt for insects sounds bizarre. I'm really struggling to picture how that works in practice.
It acts as an incredibly thin, rigid wedge. To understand why it's necessary, we have to look at the physics of their harborage. Bedbugs are driven by a biological imperative called thigmotaxis.
Thigmotaxis. Okay, I need a translation on that. Is that an anxiety thing? Like, do they feel exposed out in the open?
It's an evolutionary survival mechanism, yeah. Thigmotaxis is a compulsion to maintain physical contact with solid objects.
Oh, interesting.
For a bed bug, their extreme anatomical flatness really dictates their comfort zone. They actively seek out crevices where they feel physical pressure on both the top of their back and their belly simultaneously.
Do they like to be squished?
Exactly. A wide open space leaves them vulnerable to predators. A microscopic gap, exactly the width of a credit card, is paradise because it satisfies that need for dual surface pressure.
They have a physical compulsion to be sandwiched. That actually explains so much.
It dictates their entire living situation. That's why your inspection must start by stripping the bed down to the bare mattress. You take your flashlight and you drag the edge of that credit card deep through the folded seams and piping of the mattress.
Ah,
You are using it to pry open those tight spaces and scrape out any hidden eggs, shells, or live nymphs that are wedged in way too tightly to see from the surface.
so the credit card is basically a micro crowbar.
Precisely the function. You must flip the mattress, check the underside, and examine the box spring, particularly where the thin fabric underneath is stapled to the wooden frame. You even have to unmount the headboard from the wall.
Unmounting the headboard feels extreme, but I guess it makes sense. It's a giant, dark, undisturbed piece of wood right next to the host's head. But the guide pushes the search even further. It talks about checking under the metal drawer slides of nightstands, inspecting baseboards, behind picture frames, where the curtains fold at the floor. The one that actually made me pause, though, was inside electronics, like alarm clocks. I'm sorry, an insect feeding on my arm is commuting to work for my digital alarm clock.
Oh, absolutely. The internal casing of an alarm clock is an ideal ecosystem for them.
Really?
Yes, it is dark. It provides that tight thigmotactic pressure we talked about, and the electrical components generate a constant ambient warmth. In a heavy infestation, the competition for harborage near the bed gets really fierce, so the bugs just expand outward. They'll follow the electrical wires into wall outlets and retreat deep into wall voids.
Yeah, so what does this all mean? Let's play this out. You do this intense inspection. You take your flashlight, you scrape your credit card along the nightstand, and suddenly you see a translucent shell. Or maybe you hit a dark spot with a wet Q-tip and watch that terrifying brown ink bleed into the wood. The immediate, overwhelming human instinct is just pure panic.
Of course.
You feel violated. Your sanctuary is compromised. But the guide is extremely clear that giving in to the fight-or-flight response is completely counterproductive.
It really is. Panic is the greatest ally of a bedbug infestation. When people panic, they make impulsive, emotionally driven decisions. And in the world of pest management, impulsive decisions almost always mutate a localized problem into an expensive structural nightmare.
Right, so the flight instinct kicks in first. the immediate urge is to drag the mattress out the front door and just throw it in a dumpster.
Which is a terrible idea. Hauling an infested mattress or armchair through your home is disastrous. As you drag it down the hallway, bump it against door frames, carry it through the living room, you are basically acting like a giant salt shaker.
Oh, no.
You are actively sprinkling eggs, nymphs, and adult bugs into areas of the house that were previously completely clear.
The salt shaker of pests, that is haunting.
Oh!
And the other common flight response is grabbing a pillow and abandoning the bedroom entirely to go sleep on the living room couch.
Right.
Which intuitively makes sense. You want to sleep where the bugs aren't.
Intuitively, yes, but biologically, it is the worst move you can make. Remember their sensory apparatus. They are not territorially bound to the mattress. They are bound to your carbon dioxide emissions.
Oh, right. The CO2.
If you migrate to the couch, the colony in the bedroom will simply emerge, detect the absence of a host, pick up the new CO2 trail wafting down the hallway, and march straight to the living room.
So you haven't escaped them. You've just hand-delivered a map to a new territory. You're setting up a second buffet.
Exactly. The infestation is now in 2 rooms instead of 1. And then there's the fight response. In a desperate attempt to reclaim the space, people run to the hardware store and buy chemical bug bombs or aerosol foggers. They just assume filling the room with a toxic cloud will annihilate everything.
I mean, I totally fall into that trap of logic. If there's a literal cloud of poison, how could they possibly survive it?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the failure of DIY chemical warfare comes down to the physics of aerosol distribution and the biology of the bug. Think of using a bug bomb like trying to clean a heavily cluttered, floor-to-ceiling hoarder's garage with a leaf blower.
Okay, I can picture that.
You aren't getting rid of the dirt, you are just blowing it deeper into the microscopic cracks where you can never reach it. Foggers spray chemical particulates straight up into the air, and gravity eventually pulls those toxins down onto flat, exposed surfaces, like the top of the mattress or the center of the rug.
But the bed bugs aren't hanging out on top of the mattress. They're sandwiched inside the alarm clock and the baseboard cracks.
Exactly. The chemical cloud never penetrates those micro crevices. Instead, the sublethal exposure to the drifting chemicals just acts as an irritant. It alarms the bugs, causing them to abandon their current harborage and drive even deeper into the architecture of the house.
Making it worse.
Much worse. They will push into the wall voids and even travel along plumbing pipes to neighboring apartments. Furthermore, over-the-counter sprays are largely ineffective due to genetic mutation.
Wait, genetic mutation. They are mutating against the sprays.
Yes. Decades of exposure to common pyrethroid pesticides, which is the active ingredient in most store-bought sprays, have forced an evolutionary adaptation.
You're kidding.
I wish I was. Many bedbug populations have mutated to develop thicker, waxier exoskeletons that the chemicals just cannot penetrate. Some have even developed specific internal enzymes that rapidly break down the toxins before they can affect their nervous system. You are essentially poisoning your own sleeping environment while the bugs just shrug it off.
So throwing the bed away spreads them. Sleeping on the couch spreads them. Bombing the room pushes them into the walls, and they are immune to the spray anyway. What is the actual science-backed protocol for taking our homes back? Like, if we find the evidence, what is the immediate right response?
Containment, mechanical intervention, and professional treatment.
Okay, walk me through that.
First, you take immediate mechanical action. You carefully strip all bedding, linens, and affected clothing, sealing them in plastic bags before moving them to the laundry room. You place them directly into the washing machine on the hottest setting, and then transfer them to the dryer on the absolute highest heat for at least 30 minutes.
I know heat is a killer, but what is the actual mechanism there? Why does heat work when chemicals fail?
Heat is the ultimate biological equalizer. Unlike a chemical pesticide, which a bug can develop enzymatic resistance to, heat attacks the fundamental building blocks of the organism.
How so?
When the ambient temperature sustains above 120 degrees Fahrenheit, the proteins inside the bed bug cells literally begin to unfold and denature. The waxy protective layer of their exoskeleton melts away, causing them to rapidly dehydrate and die.
Oh, wow.
They simply cannot evolve a resistance to being cooked. The high heat of a dryer destroys every single life stage, from the sticky eggs to the adults.
I marvel at the simplicity of the dryer hack. It's so actionable, anyone can do that.
It's highly effective. Once the bedding is cooking, you meticulously vacuum the mattress, the box spring, the bed frame, and every baseboard crevice using a high-suction hose. Crucially, the moment you turn that vacuum off, You must remove the bag, seal it inside a plastic trash bag, and walk it to an outside dumpster immediately.
Do not let that vacuum sit in the closet.
Never, because they will just crawl right back out. After vacuuming, invest in high-quality, scientifically tested mattress and box spring encasements. These are specialized covers with micro-zippers that trap any surviving bugs inside, starving them while preventing new bugs from colonizing the deep foam of the mattress.
Okay, but doing laundry and vacuuming alone isn't going to save a house that has bugs living inside the alarm clocks.
No, it won't. Mechanical actions manage the immediate surface population, but because they can survive for months without a blood meal deep inside your walls, professional intervention is mandatory. Pest control experts have access to industrial tools that consumers simply do not. They utilize commercial thermal remediation, pumping massive amounts of dry heat into the room to raise the core temperature of the walls and furniture to lethal levels. They combine that with specialized, targeted chemical dust that destroy the bug's exoskeleton physically rather than chemically.
And the guide notes that Simple Pest Management provides these exact professional services across California. So if you are in San Diego, Sacramento, Riverside, or Placer counties, they do this every day. In fact, they currently offer a $97 first service, which honestly feels like an incredibly small price to pay for the peace of mind of bringing in an expert who actually knows how to find the nest.
Absolutely. Having an experienced technician conduct a thorough forensic inspection and apply a targeted protocol is really the only guaranteed method for total elimination.
Let's look at the future, though. Let's say you've dealt with the problem, or maybe someone listening is about to travel and wants to ensure they never bring a hitchhiker home. How do we build a defense against something we can't see?
Defense begins the very moment you enter a new environment. Before you unpack a single item in a hotel room, conduct a mini inspection.
Right.
Pull back the bed sheets, check the mattress piping for those ink bleed spots, and shine a flashlight behind the headboard. Most importantly, never place your suitcase on the hotel bed or an upholstered armchair. Keep your luggage elevated on a hard luggage rack or even on the tile floor of the bathroom, far away from the carbon dioxide target zone of the bed.
And then the moment we get back from the airport, we use the dryer hack.
Exactly. Unpack your travel clothes directly into the washing machine. Take your empty suitcase and thoroughly vacuum the seams before storing it. Furthermore, if you love antiquing or thrift shopping, never bring a secondhand piece of upholstered furniture into your home without heavily inspecting the joints and fabric folds with your credit card and flashlight.
That makes a lot of sense.
Early detection is your absolute best defense. Catching a localized cluster of eggs before they hatch and disperse saves thousands of dollars and immense psychological trauma.
It really is a journey. I mean, we've gone from understanding the covert carbon dioxide tracking biology of these tiny vampires to learning how to deploy the ink bleed test and the credit card micro crowbar to knowing exactly how to handle an infestation using heat rather than panicking with bug bombs.
It demands vigilance, but when you strip away the panic and understand the biology, it becomes a manageable threat. We spend so much time, money, and emotional energy optimizing the quality of our sleep. We invest in ergonomic memory foam mattresses, we curate white noise machines, and we install blackout curtains to craft the ultimate sanctuary.
We really do.
But how often do we actually consider them?
Oof. That thought is definitely going to echo in my head tonight when I turn the lights out. You think you are completely alone in the dark, but nature might just be quietly adapting to your breathing patterns right there in the seams. So, to wrap this up, trust the ink bleed test, step away from the bug bombs, and for the love of all things holy, keep your suitcases off the bed on your next trip. Until next time, stay curious and sleep tight.